You're listening to Docs Outside the Box, episode 18.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry, you're getting real life insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm your host, Dr. Nee Darko, and I got a good one for you. Before we get into the interview, I want to ask you all a question, particularly the attendings who are listening to this podcast. What if I asked you to describe the negotiation process with your hospital back when you negotiated your first contract, back when you were fresh out of residency, was naive, looking for the best deal that you can get? Would you, if given the opportunity, describe that in the most positive light? I'm talking about that experience of negotiating the contract or even just reading the contract. Did you even negotiate? What about reviewing the contract? Did you get a lawyer to review the contract with you? Did you get the right lawyer? And what I mean by that is not, a tax lawyer, but I'm talking about a lawyer who is competent in physician and employee type contracts. What about restrictive covenants? How many miles is in your radius for your covenant? How many years is your restrictive covenant? Does the contract even cover your malpractice? How about your tail? How are you going to get paid in terms of salary? What if one of your partners leaves? Will you have to take all of their call? Sounds like a lot, right? Take a big, deep breath. For some people, including myself, there's a lot of angst that goes back with memories of thinking about negotiating my first contract or other docs negotiating their first contracts. And this is familiar. This is all too familiar. To the pre-meds, the medical students and residents, I know you all have got to be, after you just heard what I just said, like, when did they teach me this? Like, did I miss class that day or something like that? And no, you didn't miss class because they didn't teach it at all. So you don't need me to remind you of how daunting, how uncomfortable the entire process of negotiating a contract or even just understanding financial management and basic practice management, how daunting that process could be for us physicians, especially since the majority of us haven't received any type of business contract training ever. And whether you go, whatever survey you read, whether, it's a survey by, A organization, B organization, whatever, the overwhelming majority of doctors feel unprepared for the business side of medicine. If you're in private practice, having the combination of administrative and financial leadership skills are very crucial because not only are you taking care of the patient and taking care of your practice, but there are people who are directly dependent on what you bring in and what you're able to negotiate, not only with the hospital, but also with insurance companies. So those skills are crucial. For those coming right out of school, this is going to be your first job. So negotiating is going to, at least in this contract, is going to set the foundation for how you're going to be judged and how your financial outlook is going to look. So nowadays, technology is a great equalizer, right? Because you can basically just do a Google search and find ways to educate yourself on these things. But that also can be very time consuming. It can also be intimidating. I mean, there's so many different entries when you type in negotiating contracts and negotiating tips, not to mention trying to find something that's specific to physician contracts that can be very difficult. And oftentimes a lot of doctors will describe it as, they're bringing a knife into a gunfight. But my next guest, Dr. Bonnie Mason, who is an orthopedic surgeon, has created basically an all-in-one encompassing system called Beyond the Exam Room. And this is a combination of an online module or online modules with live courses that teach residents, attendings, the basics of financial management and even practice management. The cherry on top of this is you even can get CME that's accredited by the University of Louisville. So Dr. Mason, she did her undergrad at Howard University in Washington, D.C., And then she went even further south and went to Morehouse School of Medicine to do her medical school. And then she went all the way across the country to California and did general surgery residency at UCLA, and then came back to the East Coast and did an orthopedic surgery residency at Howard University. So things that you're going to learn in this episode are the top 3 mistakes physicians make when negotiating contracts, what items you should prioritize over salary when negotiating contracts, is there such a thing as winning at negotiations, her thoughts on having lawyers review physician contracts, and as always, how she answers hashtag I'm not just a doc. So get your notepads ready or be ready to press rewind, because she's going to drop a lot of knowledge. There's going to be a lot of gems that she's going to drop on all of us. So be prepared. This is a really good one. And without further ado, I present Dr. Bonnie Mason. Dr. Bonnie Mason, thank you for being on Docs Outside the Box. I'm really excited to have you on the show. You are the CEO of Beyond the Exam Room, and you are literally educating physicians, one physician at a time, on things that we should have learned in medical school, but we don't learn in medical school. But before we get too much into the nitty-gritty of that, I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Darko. I appreciate the invitation and looking forward to sharing.
So, Dr. Bonnie, I just want to, after introducing you to the show, I've been really interested in what you've been doing. I've been really excited about everything that you've been doing. And I just want to take a moment, if you can take a moment to introduce us to Beyond the Exam Room, as well as introduce us to yourself.
Great. I'd be happy to. So I'm Dr. Bonnie Simpson Mason, board certified orthopedic surgeon by training. I actually grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm proud of my Southern heritage.
The ATL.
And traveled to Washington, D.C. for undergraduate school, where I was a chemistry major. It's actually a place that's close to my heart. Howard University is. My parents both went to Howard, met there, and got married on campus. And then my sister and I followed suit there by attending undergraduate at Howard University. And then I went back to Atlanta for medical school at Morehouse School of Medicine, traveled to Los Angeles to complete my general surgery residency at UCLA, and then went back to the East Coast for residency in orthopedic surgery at Howard University Hospital once again. So
you've been zigzagging through the United States,
zigzagging across the country, and they had a wonderful educational experience as a result.
So what exactly is Beyond the Exam Room?
Well, Beyond the Exam Room is an educational firm founded by physicians, myself and other board-certified physicians, to teach our colleagues about the non-clinical aspects of medicine that are essential for us to know. But these are the very, essential things that we were not taught in medical school. And I can itemize some of these issues. These are, the ability to make good and sound career decisions at the outset of our career. Knowledge and information around the business of medicine, practice management principles, and how medicine really works from an economic perspective and from a business perspective. We usually launch into our careers as excellent clinicians after training, but we have no ideas about the nuts and bolts of how medicine works. Our third pillar of education, so those were our first two, career advancement, business of medicine, and practice management. Our third pillar is that of financial fluency for physicians. We want our physicians to understand both the personal and professional aspects of finances throughout our careers, and how that can have, how that plays a vital role in us reaching the financial security that we seek for ourselves and our families. I mean, that's what we are working for after all, that financial security and stability. And then the fourth pillar, which we have added recently, is the pillar of integrating family into our curriculum. We know that physician isolation, burnout, and suicide rates are actually increasing. So we want to incorporate the idea of the physician not forging this path alone, not being this sole isolated practitioner in medicine with all of its changes, ups and downs, and stresses. we want to eliminate the idea that the physician has to be a sole source of care, love, and support for so many patients without that physician having the same benefits of that love, support, and resources from their families, be that a spouse, family member. Maybe it's a family that they have generated on their own who's not necessarily, their genetic family. But we want our physicians to know that having that support system is in place. What we found with these 4 pillars, essentially we call these our the pillars of our work-life integration. We don't call it work-life balance. Physicians work way too hard for it ever to be called essentially a balance.
Right.
But we're integrated. Those 4 pillars are integrated because you're not going to make a career decision that doesn't affect the type of practice that you're in, or the type of business decisions that you make. You're not going to make a business decision that doesn't affect your finances, and you're not going to make a financial decision that doesn't affect your family. So we know that with the overlap of all 4 of these areas with the physician in the middle, these are integrated decisions we have to make. So we encourage our physicians to think about these subjects, but think of them in parallel with all 4 pillars at the same time and not in isolation. So these are, Dr. Darko, these are some of the things we found based on our own experience as physicians running practices, the stresses that we've encountered. Me personally, I was charged with running my 2-person orthopedic surgery private practice, just fresh out of residency. So I was, I had the blessing of being able to build a surgical career by running the practice as well. But I just had no clue that I was running a business, and I really had no foundation or education on which to do so.
The School of Hard Knocks.
The School of Hard Knocks, on the job training. And one of the things I recognized was that we had not been prepared to do this. And so here I was making these financial and contractual decisions. I mean, human resource decisions, hiring and firing decisions daily with no foundation. So I actually started taking notes throughout the 5 years that I was running my practice on everything I thought we should have been taught. My friends who were also in practice started calling me for advice. So I realized, none of us as the body of physicians really had been educated in these areas. So from those notes, I learned how to write curricula and build the instructional design behind our Beyond the Exam Room courses.
This is an online format. I know you have a live lecture series also, but this is primarily through web-based training?
Primarily, our CME accredited modules are online at beyondtheexamroom.com. And these are modules that cover all 4 of the pillars that we talked about just a few minutes ago. And so those can be accessed online for CME credit, or residency programs can access Beyond the Exam Room through our website and our info@beyondtheexamroom.com email address, so that we can enroll entire residency programs as well at the GME level to help the younger physicians get a head start on some of this education as well. So we're able to provide the modules for residents and practicing physicians, because we realize hardly any of us have had this education. So primarily online, but we are launching a set of webinars in 2017. And then we also have events and conferences where we speak and where we also deliver our curriculum. We actually have a course coming up here early in December. It's our Beyond the Exam Room signature course, where we're working with physicians to build out a strategy along each one of our 4 pillars. So we take an integrated approach, a hybrid approach, mainly online, so that the modules are on demand and accessible to the physicians, at their convenience. But we also have the live course interactions and the webinar-based interactions, because physicians like to engage person to person, and we like for our docs to be able to ask their own questions and have their questions answered in person.
Now, I'm on your website right now, and I'm looking at actually the statistics, and these statistics are pretty staggering. So you have 91% of doctors feel unprepared for the business side of medicine. 33% doctors spend 60-hour work week performing non-medical tasks, and 29% of physicians report experiencing some form of depression, in medical school or residency. When you started Beyond the Exam Room, was there a prototypical physician in mind that you were thinking of when you created this, or is this basically for all types of physicians?
I probably didn't have a prototypical physician in mind other than I was that physician. I was that physician running my practice with no clue as to where to start. And what I recognized, between myself and my friends is that we're all very bright people. We're all physicians are very astute once they have the information. So I said, so maybe we need to just fill the void, providing docs with the core foundation in these 4 areas that I've talked about, so that we can then customize whatever our additional education needs to be in these areas. But let's at least provide the textbook. Let's provide these 12 modules online that will serve as a core foundational textbook that, any physician can go through and now have a baseline understanding and then build their practical and day-to-day business of medicine education around, so we can customize it based on our own textbook. So no, I was building it based out of my own experience and that of the additional physicians whom I partnered with to build the platform.
So you basically learned on the job how to negotiate with, I'm sure, hospitals and insurance companies.
Yes, all of that was on the job training and learning to read contracts for, computers, understanding what hiring and firing practices were and how they varied from state to state, what my rights were as an employer, what my employees' rights were. I learned about workers' compensation personally, right? Because I had my own employees and had to be able to figure out how to provide them with the coverage they needed. So all of these day-to-day aspects, we hear about them, but we don't really know or have a foundation by which we can understand what these details mean.
Or even the implications, right?
Oh my gosh, the implications are huge. That's exactly it. So we strike out into the world as physicians because we are very bright. We're like, we can figure this out. Hey, that's what I thought. I was an orthopedic surgeon. This was my ego speaking fully. I can admit that I should be able to figure this out. Right? I just passed my orthopedic surgery board. I should be able to do this.
Right.
And I realized I was in over my head very quickly.
Because placing a leg in traction definitely prepares you to talk to malpractice companies and deal with human resources, right?
Right. And negotiate, right? And negotiate, annual premiums.
Right.
It's
the same thing.
Completely. A total knee replacement, negotiating a contract. Absolutely. So, that was the fallacy of thought that I, led with, but I know many of us do because we think, well, surely we're supposed to know this. Otherwise somebody would have taught us about it. But Beyond the Exam Room is here because we know that, only a handful of schools are now launching into providing this curriculum at the medical school level. I actually work as an adjunct professor at the University of Louisville, and we've implemented Beyond the Exam Room at the University of Louisville for all of its residents across the board in all specialties. Now we're in year number 5 there because they've seen the importance of making sure that their residents have some exposure. But we also know that the balance of physicians who graduate did not get this education. So even for our practicing physicians, to answer your earlier question, who are 1, 3, 5, and sometimes even 10 years out, to come through Beyond the Exam Room, make sure we have the basics and the fundamentals. This is a foundational curriculum. This isn't, the advanced business courses that you might get with the American College of Physician Executives or some of those advanced business courses there. No, these are the foundational tenets and fundamentals that we need so that we can build onto that our leadership capacity and acumen, so that we can build onto that our knowledge of healthcare reform and those changes that are coming down the pike, especially now.
Oh, they're coming. They're coming.
They're here, but we have no foundation. So let's build the foundation, and then whatever comes, because we have a strong foundation, whichever the way the wind blows, our foundation is sturdy and sound, and we'll be able to move with it. But we'll move with it from an educated and empowered perspective, as opposed to sitting here, being in the position where we're just being told what to do, and we have no recourse.
Now, Dr. Bonner, you said that you're an adjunct professor at University of Louisville. You've been using the tenets and actually implemented beyond the exam room for about 5 years there. Taking a step back and looking at obviously the residents and the chief residents that have come through the program or have come to you, can you talk about some of the mistakes that you think physicians make when negotiating contracts? Maybe top 3 mistakes that you can think of off the top of your head that they make when negotiating contracts?
Oh, I'd be happy to talk about those mistakes.
You probably got like top 10.
Probably have about top 10. And these aren't mistakes just by new physicians that are graduating and going into the workplace. These are mistakes that our practicing physicians continue to make, even when they're transitioning from practice to practice, or from one practice type to another practice type. And the first mistake is that we fail to negotiate. We just don't negotiate at all. We assume that the person or the employer who's writing the contract is writing a fair contract and is looking out for our interests. And it's not that our employers aren't looking to be fair, but physicians have to understand that the author of the contract makes sure that everything that they need as the employer is in the contract. So the reciprocal of that is the physician has to make sure that our needs and wants are represented in the contract as well. The employer is under no obligation to make sure that your specific needs are met. Case in point, I was reviewing a contract for a young doctor going into a practice on the East Coast. I happened to know that this person was recently married and was looking to start a family. There was no maternity leave indicated or specified in that person's contract. So I said to that, I verified with the person that was important to her. She said, absolutely it was. I said, but it's not in your contract. So you want to make sure, because it is important to you, that it is represented in black and white. Sure enough, she went back and she was able to negotiate for a maternity leave that was even greater than the standard maternity leave previously offered because it was important to her. So if we don't negotiate, then we're not going to have the things in the contract that are imperative and important for ourselves and our family that are going to lead towards the stability that we need in our own terms. So we can't assume that the contract that we're being given will represent us and our needs, because that's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility to ask for what we need and to see that it gets written into the contract. Negotiating, it feels very daunting and it feels like something that we don't want to do. Why? Because we've never had to do it, nor have we had the opportunity.
I think a lot of people look at it almost like adversarial, and it kind of turns them off, makes them very nervous.
It does. Right. It does. And plus, we weren't given the opportunity to negotiate for a med school spot. We were just happy we got one, right?
Yeah.
We weren't given the opportunity to negotiate for a residency spot. We were just happy to match.
Right.
This represents the antithesis of who we've had to be before, but we have to be a different person in the world of business because we need to make sure our needs and wants are met in that position, because we want to be in that position that, we want to take that job and we want to be secure in that position. We're not necessarily looking to up and move in a year or two from now. So we want to negotiate the best in the contract for ourselves. And that can be done in a very congenial and non-adversarial way once the physician has the tools and practices with someone who has negotiated contracts in the past. So it doesn't have to be this upsetting kind of nerve-wracking experience, especially if you're clear on what you want. You can certainly say, future employer, I would certainly like to discuss a couple things in the contract that are just important to me and my family. And certainly you can understand that, negotiating maternity leave, I'd like to see that in black and white. And then also too, I'd like to talk about the malpractice coverage in the contract. Can we have a conversation around that? When you approach an employer in that way, because that's going to be a future, essentially a partner that you're going to be working for. Most partners, if they're reasonable, most employers, if they're reasonable, will have a conversation and would be willing to talk to you. If not, if that employer is not willing to discuss X, Y, and Z, if they are not communicating, routinely, and if they are not accessible, then that's not a job that you want to take.
Okay, so that leads me to my next point then. So, okay, so you're mentioning what if you get stonewalled? So
Yes.
when I've been in this situation, I've heard other physicians talk about this situation, the concept of a quote unquote standard contract. So you get a contract put in front of you, and basically this is the standard contract that gets presented to all physicians. So there's no room for negotiation. Isn't that a form of kind of stonewalling you and saying, we're not willing to negotiate? What do you do in that situation?
What I recommend every physician does in that situation is have at least two contracts that they're comparing to at the same time. You are going to feel stonewalled if you only have one option. There's no reason for our physicians to have one option when it comes to looking at potential employment. There is a need. We know there's a physician shortage. I recommend that all physicians have and investigate at least 2 to 3 employment opportunities simultaneously so that you can compare apples to apples to apples. So if one group is just refusing to negotiate with you on any item, and maybe it's something huge that they won't negotiate on, but maybe they're willing to negotiate on something that's a little bit smaller or something that's important to you, most employers are willing to negotiate a little bit. But if it's absolutely not, we won't negotiate, then that may or may not be an employment situation that you want to enter into because they're unwilling to bend at all. When you, as a physician, you're going to have life changes happen. If that employer doesn't work with you before you sign the paperwork, they might not be so willing to work with you after you sign your paperwork and life happens.
So that may be a bad sign then, basically.
That may be a bad sign. Now, I have worked with big corporate attorneys who work for hospitals and hospital systems. Certainly, they've made the point that they're not going to negotiate on every single point for all 600 of their physicians that they employ. But if it is something small that can be written into the contract as an addendum, then they're usually willing to do that because they want you to come on board because you're the primary revenue generator for any hospital or hospital system, and they know that. But I would still say have a point of leverage. Most of us did not interview at just one residency spot. We interviewed at several, so we could compare this residency program to the next. I recommend you do the same thing for employment. It takes a little bit of work, but okay, we're used to work.
Well, I don't think we're used to having people kind of come after us or why am I forgetting the word right now? But basically try to woo us to get a job, which is in essence what the interview is. They're trying their best to get us to come and pick their hospital over the other hospitals. But if we compare and contrast that to residency or fellowship, it's us trying to convince that residency to let us in. So docs, take this as an opportunity, like Dr. Bonnie said, to really compare apples to apples, have 2, 3, and my advice, take 10 and, be able to, compare apples to apples and see what else is out there. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Bonnie.
No problem. And let me just add that most people say, well, I don't have time to do that. That's really because most of us start looking for our first job, or even if we're transitioning to another job within 6 months of needing to start work or within 6 months of ending our training. We need to start looking for employment about 18 months before we finish our training.
18 months?
18 months. Think about it.
Oh, wow.
Think about it.
Okay. I want to hear this.
I have another parallel for you. These are my medical business parallels.
Let's hear it.
As you started looking for and applying for medical school as a junior in college.
That is true. Yeah, that's true.
You didn't wait.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then you started looking at residency programs as a third-year med student. You didn't wait till fourth year. Yes. And then you also started looking for your fellowships as a year before you ended your residency training. You didn't wait until your last year of residency.
Dr. Bonnie dropping knowledge. Yeah, you're right about that, actually.
So we've been there. We've done that. Uh-huh. So we don't have to look at this as an arduous and overwhelming task. We've done this before, Doc. We've done it. So we can do it again, especially on the most important platform, which is starting our lives out in our careers. So we can do this with the right timing and the right information. And we have a timeline in Beyond the Exam Room. It's actually our Module 6, How to Join a Practice. We have a step-by-step timeline that says this is how you start looking for your position. And you start early. If the docs I know that have done that, they've had at least 3 contracts to compare to one another. Versus my docs who wait till the last minute, they have one and they feel stonewalled and they feel cornered, like they have to take that one job.
Now, Dr. Bonnie, that's a really good point. Talking about taking time to at least 18 months to look for a job. Mm-hmm. And look, when as physicians, one of the things that we think about is we're going to be helping people, and in a way that nobody else can help people. And also we're going to get paid, right? Well, at least that was the thought process maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I think a lot of physicians, I'm sure you see it too. They come into looking at a contract. They come into thinking about their life as an attending as getting the big bucks. And one of the biggest things that they want to negotiate, obviously, or look at is salary. But I think we all know that salary oftentimes doesn't show a full picture of what's going on with the contract or what, how happy a physician is going to be. There's studies that show salary and physician satisfaction are not correlated at all. So what are some other negotiation points that you think physicians should be more focused on? Obviously, salary is important, but what are some other things that they should be focused on? I know you had mentioned you have an example of maternity leave. What are things within that realm that physicians should be paying attention to?
So that's a great question, because I actually query my physician audiences when we're teaching about what is the first thing they look for in a contract. And my younger docs will almost inevitably, overwhelmingly say salary or compensation. But then my older docs who've been out in the world a little bit longer give me a full array of other answers. And we have the top 4 things that our physicians should be looking for and reviewing in their contract. Compensation is number 5.
What? Number 5. Okay.
Number 5.
Okay.
So the top 4, not in any order, ranking order, but the term and termination clause within a contract is essential for a physician to understand.
Say that again. The term
of the contract.
Okay.
Which sometimes is coupled with the termination clause of the contract. So again, this goes back to just core information, core knowledge that we cover in Module 3, our contracts module and beyond the exam room, because of this very scenario that you presented, Doc. So understanding the length of the contract that you're signing, and then what are the reasons why you can be terminated.
Okay.
You have to understand that coming in, and you can be terminated with or without cause. And that's going to appear in every employment contract that you have. So without cause means if they don't like the blue shirt you have on today, you can be terminated without cause. It doesn't have to be anything substantial. Termination with cause means maybe you fail to renew your medical license, or maybe you are unable to become credentialed for whatever the reason at a hospital. Those are termination with cause clauses.
Okay.
So these are substantial reasons why you may be terminated. As a physician, we don't ever think that would happen to us, but it happens all the time.
And you're saying that that's negotiable. So the items within with cause versus without cause, those items are negotiable.
Some of them are negotiable. Many times these termination with cause clauses may be a little vague.
Okay.
So in your review of the contract, you want the specifics to be laid out about, if you are absent for a prolonged period of time. Well, what's the definition of prolonged? Is it a week? Is it 6 months? What, you want to read through those termination with cause clauses to make sure you understand what they are and to make sure you agree with them. So you walk in fully knowledgeable about all of the reasons you might be terminated.
Okay.
So you can't be surprised later. So we want to manage expectations by knowing what rights the employer has to terminate me. And similarly, there should be a right for you to terminate your contract, but that the length of time that you have to give notice to the hospital should reciprocate and should reflect the amount of time they have to give you notice that you're being terminated. So you want that to be reciprocal, and you want it to be even. Sometimes we've seen in contracts that the hospital can give the doctor 30 days notice, but the doctor has to give the hospital 6 months notice. So that's not reciprocal, right? That's not even. So you negotiate for those numbers to be the same, for that notice time frame to be equivocal for both parties.
Okay. All right. That's
right?
a great, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right. But a lot of our doctors get surprised when they get a 30-day termination notice and they have no idea why they were terminated. They have no idea. And then, one term might be cited from their agreement. They don't know what that is or what that means. So we just want our docs to be informed about what they're signing. So the second thing that physicians have to be aware of in their contract, more important than compensation, is your non-compete clause.
What is a non-compete?
So the non-compete clause is the statement within your contract that says, if you were to no longer work in this particular practice, that you cannot work within a certain boundary for a certain period of time, because we don't want you taking our patients, meaning the patients that you've seen under this particular practice, with you, right? Because we are the revenue generators, which is what physicians have to understand. So as the revenue generator in that particular practice, you're seeing patients generating revenue for that particular practice. That practice does not want you to leave the practice, open up shop across the street. And now those patients who are generating revenue for practice A are now generating revenue for your new practice across the street. So then you become a competitor. So these non-compete clauses are usually put in place. And these are state specific. And there are a few states, I think only 3 or 4 states, where non-competes are not legal. But in the remainder of the states, in the U.S., they are legal. And so you want to have that non-compete clause reviewed, not just by yourself, but by a healthcare attorney who's working on your behalf.
And usually the boundaries are a certain mileage from the hospital?
Mm-hmm. So the non-compete has to be reasonable in scope and duration. So scope is the radius around that hospital or practice in which you are prohibited from practicing. And that varies from state to state. And the duration, the time frame during which you cannot see patients, is also specified within that non-compete clause as well. So you're looking for those 2 things within that non-compete.
That's great. Okay. Keep it coming.
Two more. Okay. Then the malpractice coverage is the employer providing malpractice, which is the same thing as liability insurance coverage. Or are you, the physician, responsible for your liability coverage? Depending on your specialty, many emergency physicians have to provide their own malpractice insurance coverage. Physicians, who work in locum tenens arrangements sometimes have to provide their own insurance. So you want to know who's providing your malpractice insurance coverage, what type of malpractice insurance coverage are they providing, which type, and then who's covering your tail policy if in fact you're going to have a claims made malpractice insurance policy. So there are a lot of details to get into when it comes to that malpractice coverage, how that should be reflected in your contract. But many of us just don't even know what type of malpractice coverage is being offered, if at all. So that's another thing that can really sink the physician if they decide to leave the practice. And then all of a sudden they look up and they have to cover their tail insurance policy, which is usually 2 to 2.5 times the annual premium for a physician.
And that could be really expensive.
My annual premium was $24,000. And when I wound up having to retire from medicine, my tail insurance was going to be $60,000 payable in 90 days of closure of the business.
Wow. Okay.
So you may be stuck.
Shell-shocked.
Practice,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You could be stuck in that practice if you can't pay that tail coverage to move. So there's some variations and ways to negotiate some options for the physician around that. But if you don't know to look for it, if you don't know what those details are, hey, they could have paid you $250,000, but if you're unhappy there, you want to leave, but you can't afford to because of the tail policy, that's more important than the compensation, your flexibility and your options there.
Is there such a thing as winning at negotiation? I've heard people say it's a give and take. I've heard people say, you try to get as much as you can. What are your thoughts on the whole process of quote unquote winning at negotiating?
Well, I view a physician entering into an employment situation almost as a marriage, meaning at the outset when you are looking at that job, reviewing this particular employment opportunity and its potential for being a good fit for you, you're essentially dating, right? So you are seeing if you can work with this group of people, with the employer, with the future colleagues, and you're trying it on. You're negotiating to see if it would be a good fit. If it's a good fit, that's creating a win-win, which means the physician is getting most of what he or she needs in this employment arrangement. And then, of course, the employer is getting what they need, which is another revenue generator, hopefully in their specialty. You want to feel valued. You want to feel that you have a voice as a physician employee. You want to find out these types of things ahead of time in terms of a fit. So the goal is win-win. If you're in a situation where you feel like you're having to give too much and you're not getting enough of what you want from the outset, just like in a marriage, then things don't usually get better after you say, I do. They usually get a little bit worse because then you learn more details day to day about what actually happens within that particular practice, just like in your marriage. So you really want to look for the best fit possible up front, because that's your best time to negotiate. That's your greatest opportunity and your best leverage is before you sign the paperwork. So that's my approach, is try to create the win-win. But when you have options, then you have time and you have the ability to not just negotiate, but to compare so you can see which practice or employment opportunity is closest to fitting your needs. When you only have one option, then yes, you may feel like, I'm getting sucked into something that I'm not happy with, but that's because you don't have any other options. So I'm big on having the options. I want to leave the audience with that. Please, please make sure we start out, even if you're transitioning into another practice, look at your options and have 2 or 3 options on the table. That lends itself to your being in a position of creating a win-win versus a win-lose. If somebody's feeling like they're the loser, be it the employer or the physician, that's not a good long-term outcome.
Yeah, there's going to be some sour apples that eventually show itself. Yeah.
It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable.
Now, what about lawyers? You think a lawyer is always necessary to negotiate a contract?
I think a lawyer wrote the contract, so a lawyer should review the contract.
Okay. Well, that's it. There you go, guys.
And that's a healthcare attorney that's working on your side as the physician. The employer has their own attorneys. That's not your attorney, physicians.
So don't get a tax attorney, basically.
Don't get a tax attorney. I tell people all the time, I don't want my sister, the psychiatrist, seeing my patient with a fibula fracture. She doesn't want me treating her bipolar patients as an orthopedist.
I got you.
You want a healthcare attorney to review the contract. They can advise you, and I advise the physician to do their own negotiating. But we should not think that we have the skill set to read all the nuances of a contract. That's not our skill set. That's not our core skill set. We can have some baseline knowledge about it, which is why we have a full module on it. And we talk about having that healthcare attorney in our go-to team of advisors, someone that you can call, someone that you can, bounce things off of, and someone to review your contract ahead of time. And it's worth it. So if the healthcare attorney charges, let's say, $1,000, even $2,000 to review a contract whose compensation package is worth $250,000, I say that's worth it.
Absolutely.
Especially if they have good referrals from other physicians.
Absolutely. Now, I want to take a moment just to take a step back and pivot a little bit. You mentioned briefly that you had retired from clinical medicine. Obviously, now you're in the realm of teaching physicians, how to learn or teaching physicians to understand the things that we didn't understand or get taught in medical school. Obviously, this is more of entrepreneurship for you. How did you transition from a clinical practice to just being an entrepreneur?
So my transition was not anticipated, nor was I excited about it. I actually was forced into early retirement with the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. So as a surgeon, it primarily affected my right elbow, and I'm a right-handed surgeon. So I was actually only able to operate for about 3 years or so following residency. And during that time, I recognized that my clinical career was probably going to be cut short because orthopedics is very physical in its demands from the physician. And even if it's just in the office itself. But, I'm a surgeon at heart. I wanted to operate. So once I realized my days of operating were going to be cut short, I actually went back to, I actually examined what my other passions were. And I've always had a passion for teaching and for mentoring and for helping the folks behind me, get through the same path, maybe with a nugget or a tool that I acquired. And so basically in identifying the void in the business of medicine, I recognized that, perhaps we could fill a void by providing some tools and resources, in this curriculum format, especially because I already had a knack for that. I love to teach. So I went and I took a faculty development program. It was an executive faculty development program to learn how to build curricula and about instructional design so that I could take all of the notes that I had taken over the past 5 years of running my practice and translate it into a curriculum that for physicians that could help fill that void around that business of medicine and financial acumen that we so desperately need in medicine.
You're always contributing. I really appreciate that.
My parents are big service people, and they brought my sister and I up in a world of service and always giving back. And so service leadership was something that kind of took hold to both of us very early on. And, the challenge has been, as an entrepreneur, essentially me starting over, having retired from a clinical career setting, moving into an educational entrepreneurial setting, which is a challenge in and of itself. And I would say it's taken, and we've been at this work over the past 10 years, so it's taken the 10 years to build the Beyond the Exam Room that you see right now, and to build partnerships and relationships and to shift, to turn left, and shift our mode of generating revenue to where we are now. And so with our new model, we are reaching out to physicians directly. And initially, I didn't want physicians to have to pay for this type of education as well. I don't honestly believe that we as physicians need MBAs to understand the core fundamentals of making good career decisions, being good leaders, business decisions, and finances. We don't need an MBA for that, but we do need context. And we need these core concepts related to us in a way that physicians understand. So that's that's the nuance. And I would say that's our point of differentiation that Beyond the Exam Room brings to the table. That's why our tagline is physicians educating physicians, because we've been there, we've done that. So we can relate these concepts in ways that I've tried to do with the parallels that I've outlined today, so that the physician can understand, we can get this. We can get what's happening in healthcare from an economic and business perspective if it's pointed out to us and laid out in a way that makes sense in the terms of pathways and red flags and take-home points. That's how we lay out our fundamentals of our curriculum. And we're really glad that we've been able to assign CMEs, so now our practicing docs can get this information as well. So we're passionate. And
I can feel it.
This will be the work that I'm doing for a long time.
I love it. Please let me ask you this one question. So compare and contrast. What do you think your contribution to medicine now is compared to what your contribution would have been as an orthopedic surgeon? Because there was a path and arc that you were heading into. You had to pivot. You didn't mope. You changed. Have you ever thought about what your contribution would be to medicine if you just remained an orthopedic surgeon running a practice versus now? You're able to affect so many more people doing what you do now.
No, that's a great question. For maybe the first 4 or 5 years after I transitioned, it was tough. It was a tough transition because I really wanted to be in the operating room. But what I came to realize, Doc, maybe about 5 years ago, and I've been able to articulate this maybe only over the past 3 to 4 years, was that my rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis, and especially the symptoms having primarily affected the disease process primarily affected my right elbow, essentially was me being extricated permanently from the operating room so I could do this work. And so once look at it from that perspective, that it was definitive, and I'm a spiritual person, so I honestly know that God made this a one-way road out of the operating room so I could do this particular work based on my own experience, so I could speak to my fellow physicians and make this contribution, in an entrepreneurial way that has, several steps that are just step after step into the darkness. But once I take one step, then the next step is revealed. And then we have more people who come back and say, thank you for this information. Thank you for making this available. I wish I had had this when I was a resident. I wish I had had this information when I was younger in my practice. So the more I hear that, the more it just fuels our process and our, commitment to moving forward. And what we're hoping is that it continues to fuel our partnerships. We're moving to not just reaching out to our physicians as individuals, which was what I didn't initially want to do, but docs go and get the information that they need from an educational perspective. So by all means, we want to make it available. But we also want to partner with our hospital systems and physician employers, because we know that our revenue, having our frontline revenue generators be informed decision makers, is going to be one of the ways that we can drive down healthcare costs. And having our physicians, and for that matter, the entire integrated healthcare team, understand how to help set quality and value metrics, understanding how their decisions play into the quality and value reimbursement models that are here. Those models are here. We have to have an understanding of that so we can contribute to the solution and not be oblivious, nor think that we aren't empowered to help shape change, because we absolutely are. We absolutely are. We just need the resources, tools, and information. And that's what Beyond the Exam Room's here for.
Well, we're not just worker bees, obviously, right?
No, absolutely not. Every physician was a leader coming into medical school. Think about it. Every single physician had a great CV coming into medical school, coming into residency. So why should we be marginalized to just being worker bees? Absolutely not. We should be at the table helping to shape change. Don't get me started, Dr. Darwin. Don't get me started.
Yeah, take us to church. I love it, though. I think it's very easy for me to feel your passion, and obviously the audience is going to hear your passion. So listen, I love the honesty. I love your passion. So, just keep going. I love it. But, I want to ask you some quick fast fire questions. We're getting towards the end of the interview. Are you game?
I'm game. Ready.
All right. So what's one thing that you want listeners to get from this podcast?
I would like them to know that there is a resource out there for physicians that we are going to expand in the future, but your physician to physician resource is Beyond the Exam Room. beyondtheexamroom.com, whether you are looking to stay in medicine, which we hope our physicians will do. We want you to be educated and empowered to do so. And then some of our physicians are transitioning to administrative and leadership roles. We're here to help with that transition as well, by helping to arm you with those tools that you need in order to transition successfully into leadership roles as well. And then even for some of our docs who are outside of the box, as business people ourselves, that we have some systematic opportunities set up for education for physicians, no matter what our pursuits end up being career-wise.
Excellent. What's one thing physicians can do to make themselves more confident in negotiations?
Become educated about negotiating skill sets, practice negotiating, and by all means, have the basis for your negotiation intact. So know what your productivity is. Know what comparable salaries are if that's what you want to negotiate. You have to have research before you come into a negotiation, and not just wanting to research this and that because of how you feel. No, this is data driven, and it is based on research and information. If that is the basis of your negotiation, you can go in feeling confident. It doesn't have to be adversarial. You can simply refer to the data. You can refer to the research.
Don't let the facts fool you.
Don't let the facts fool you. You need that. This is not something, we go in because we want our negotiation to work well, and we hope it will. Negotiations are not based on hope. And we don't get what we deserve. We get what we negotiate. And that's imperative for us to understand.
I love that term. It is so true. So
Yes.
true.
I didn't make it up. I forget who quoted that, but we don't get what we deserve because we all deserve so much as physicians. We've worked heck of hard all of our careers, but we don't get what we deserve. We get what we negotiate. And that's a core business tenet.
I think that concept kind of helps you not take things personal when you're negotiating also, right?
Absolutely. It really is not, it's not personal. It's really not personal.
So look, I've done a lot of stalking on you. You are involved in so many different things, obviously clinician, obviously entrepreneur, speaker. You're doing all of these different things. Give us your best productivity life hack. What are you doing to properly give time to all these different things?
Oh, that's a hard one. Because that changes.
See, I've been giving you softballs.
You have. I would say that one of the primary tools that I use for myself, and this is what I use for my coaching clients as well, and my physician friends, is I let myself off the hook. I tell myself, you've gone at it 110% today. Close the computer. We'll get up and we will go at it another 110% tomorrow. But if I don't give myself time to recharge, A, give myself credit, B, for the work I have done, and C, not take it so seriously, meaning to the point where I'm stressed and, worked up and I can't enjoy my husband or my family. That's the point where I've taken it too far, even as this type A entrepreneur who's a former surgeon, and that energy is still in me. I have to say, okay, you know what, Bonnie, you've done enough. Let yourself off the hook. You've done a great job today. So that's self-validation, permission to be a person and not this driving force all of the time. And I also give myself permission to make mistakes because nobody's perfect. So there are always things that I wish I had done better. Returned an email sooner, or, handled a situation, a negotiation or a business deal differently. I let myself off the hook and say, hey, I'm learning and I want to keep growing. So as long as I see myself going in the forward direction and not backwards, as long as I see myself taking one step at a time, not trying to take 10, I give myself that grace. That's hard to do, but I have to remind myself of that. And then I remind my friends to give me that grace as well and to let me off the hook. And I do the same for them.
I love the answer. Amazing. That was great.
Okay. That was hard, but okay. Pulled it together.
It was an excellent answer though. And like I said, I really appreciate the audience appreciates your honesty. Now, the last thing I want to ask you is it's not a question. It's actually a statement. It's a statement that I ask all of my guests. It's a statement that says, I'm not just a doc. I'm and it's blank. And I've asked this to all of my guests. My guests have answered world traveler. My guests have asked doctorpreneur. My guests have answered so many different answers. So Dr. Bonnie, I want to ask you, I present to you, I'm not just a doc. I'm a
filler of voids.
Oh, okay. That's different. I like that. Okay.
Filler of voids.
I like that. Good answer. Good answer.
I have to say wife and mom too, because without them, they won't let me fill the voids. So they're my rock and my foundation, and they allow me to go out here and fill voids and to connect with my fellow physicians.
I appreciate that answer. So people have done slashes in the past, so I appreciate that answer.
I had to slip that in on the end.
They might be listening.
Yes. Yeah.
This was a great conversation. I've learned a lot from you. I think the audience has learned a lot from you. But I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for what you've done. Dr. Bonnie, for many, and maybe even for all of us, becoming a physician, treating patients is reaching the top of a mountain, that we started climbing for some, even for us, as early as childhood. Mm-hmm. And for you, reaching the top of the mountain was becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And recognizing that you had to pivot. I want to acknowledge you for realizing that, there are multiple ways outside of the operating room, outside of the hospital to help people and to make our profession more inclusive and also even diverse with the work you're doing with dimensions. I also want to acknowledge you for not being complacent, what you're doing with Beyond the Exam Room, helping residents and attendings become better at negotiating. It's just making our profession that much better, that much stronger. and what you're doing is just amazing. So kudos to you. I wish you much success. Beyond the Exam Room is doing amazing things. And I just want to acknowledge you, Dr. Bonnie, for what you're doing. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your words and the opportunity to speak today. Thank you. Docs Outside the Box. This is awesome, an awesome endeavor, and I wish you all the best as well.
That's a wrap. Episode 18 is officially over. That was really a good interview. I hope you guys gained a lot of information from that. Dr. Bonnie Mason dropping gems, dropping knowledge, dropping dimes on all of you all on how to really understand the things that we didn't learn in medical school. So as always, I'm interested in getting your feedback after this one. Remember, you can get in contact with me through Twitter at DocsOTB, as well as on the Facebook page, as well as via email, NII at DocsOTB. That's DocsOTB.com. And as always, links to Beyond the Exam Room will be in the show notes. Also, remember, if you're finding value with the show, remember to subscribe. The links to subscribe via iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher Radio are in the show notes. Remember also to share this with those who you think will really appreciate this. And as always, it takes about 45 seconds. Leave me a review on iTunes. So remember, stay tuned for more episodes. But before I jet, remember to live outside the box.